Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
Joseph, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Doing all right, man. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, glad to have you on. So I know a lot of people see you online and see what you're doing with, you're out there with everybody, like at IWF, pictures with everyone, talking to everyone. Kind of give us a rundown of Innovative Wood Process, which is your business, and how you got there.
Yeah, well, again, I'm humbled for the opportunity to join you on this podcast, Zach. Obviously, it's pretty obvious what I grew up doing, maybe what my first profession was, right? People are like trying to make the link, right? So when I was younger, through my dad and other people encouraging me, said, look, what are the lives like of all the cowboys that you know, right? And I came to the realization that most professional cowboys were broke, divorced, injured, hot, tired, cold. And so I was like, okay, I've got to pursue a different profession. So
I think you just wrote a country
after college song. Maybe, right? A finishing country song. Has anybody done that before? I don't think that. I don't think that it's been done so far.
Could be the first.
A beer, a spray gun, some coating. Who knows what will happen, right?
Oh goodness.
So I got out of school. I finished college, and an elder that we went to church with worked at a furniture factory, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And he said, "Hey, we've got an opening for an industrial engineering position. I want you to come apply." So there was a furniture factory in Belton, Texas called Superior Furniture. This is in 96. And so one day I didn't have a job. One day I had a job. And so I started this job. And so it's chairs, work surfaces, that type of furniture, commercial office furniture. And whenever you're absorbing all this, you start looking at, okay, here's the stuff that's easy to understand, and here's the stuff that's hard to understand. And my first introduction to industrial wood finishing was on a hang line, but it was actually a UV hang line. It had vertical ovens, right? And the people that sprayed the UV actually had to get into a pressurized suit and full face respirator to spray. They sprayed a water-based stain, but the sealer, top coat, all the rest of that was all done separate. And then they had a powder coat finishing line for all the metal. And everybody wanted to work on the powder coat line because it was 10 times easier than the wood finishing line.
Yeah,
right. So one is I learned that nobody wanted to do it if they didn't have to. A, it was more difficult than what it seemed. B, there was some type of safety precautions that were needed. So I just tell you that, the context of doing that. So fast forward, I went to work for Conestoga Wood Specialties, and they said, well, how did you do finishing at Superior Furniture? So I started explaining to them about UV and a hang line. They're like, oh, we've never heard about that. And I said, okay, well, how do you finish, right? I said, well, we spray a conversion varnish on a flat line. And I said, well, I've never heard about that either, right? So to paint a picture, we all have these worlds that we grow up in, we live in, and so we have our world, and then you have this much bigger world, right? And working in different companies, right? Making plywood, cabinets, doors, furniture, building factories. Finishing was always a part that I saw that was the least understood. It was the place where the most amount of problems were. It was the area where maybe the most amount of disinformation was. Then you have like this permitting side where some states, have strict permitting rules on the emissions you can have. And so doing that in so many, running roll coat lines hand spray hang lines, robotic spray hang lines, flat lines. I put a flat line in at Lido Cabinetry back in 2008 to do water-based UV. And so just the knowledge of the chemicals and everything is we repeated these experiences. Obviously, a permanent employee, most of these that I'm talking about now, is every step I was learning, but every time I learned, I always learned, okay, now what's the next question I'm going to be asking? Because I'm never going to do finishing the same way that I've done it. There's always something better, right? Curing, chemicals, prep. So then as we began to do more of that, I just began to see, okay, here's all kinds of chemicals you can do to use to do wood finishing. And what a lot of people don't know, there's actually been more chemical development for wood finishing than there has been like new machines being developed in the last 20 years. And so
I could definitely see that. In
2019, and it continues, right? So in 2019, we decided to start IWPS. And the very first job that we had was to help Bentwood custom cabinets in Dallas with their finishing. And again, Bentwood is the highest of the high end. And so obviously people, you always pigeonhole yourself whenever there's, whenever you're subject to social media and there's press and all those type of things. And so finishing is about 30% of what we do. We've got 170 plus clients in 5 countries, all over the U.S., and I would say finishing is probably about 30% of what we do. That said, it is probably one of the engagements that people benefit from the most. And when I say that is people will call and say, look, we've got coating failures in the field, right? We had a client and they put all this high-end cabinetry and millwork in a $100 million home in Colorado, and they said, hey, look, we have coating that is peeling, it's coming off, et cetera. And so sometimes people are looking at solving one problem, and then when we get there, we realize that, okay, this is a symptom, really. A coating failure is usually a symptom, and it's a symptom of not understanding chemicals and having a process to begin with. So we take a dry film gauge and we measure, right? And they're using a pre-cat, and they had 20 mils of dry film built. And so as it began to,
there we go.
You can see pictures, right?
Yeah.
So then I started telling people, look, if you got to have a lot of dry film build, depending on how much it is, look at a urethane, look at a 2K urethane with high solids, look at a polyester if that's not enough. But pushing chemicals beyond their physical and chemical properties is something that we see without that basis of understanding. It's a symptom, and it's not actually the problem. So I know that that's the long way around, but I wouldn't say that this business started just to help people with finishing, but it was definitely the beginning, and it's still a significant amount of what we do, not just here in the U.S., but in other countries.
So when you say 30%, what else does IWPS, like what other services are you guys offering to your customers? Yeah,
so it's really a holistic approach to the wood industry. So starting up factories, moving factories, re-engineering product design, industrial engineering, manufacturing engineering, tooling design. Tooling is a whole other thing. It's by the time you get done with understanding finishing, right? Tooling, sanding, all those type of things is just a whole other layer. And so with a very, very deep technical experience and a group of people, it's not just myself, we really help companies move from point A to point B. And it looks all different ways, right? Some people want to implement software. We're going to do a webinar here with Syncly and Biesi, great people. We're veteran implementers with software, ERP, depending on what type of software it is. That's becoming more and more as people look to a more scalable, sustainable model and less of the craftsman type mentality. So I'm not going to say that we're going to do everything, because it's not true. It would be great to say that, but I would say is that we bring probably one of the deepest and widest sets of technical expertise to people that are doing industrial woodworking.
Yeah. Finishing, I've always thought, my father-in-law and I used to talk all the time, and he's one of my biggest mentors. So, he gets a ton of credit for what I've learned, but he was always real big, and it's something that doesn't happen in this industry, in the finishing, whether it's industrial or architectural or commercial, is training. Like there's no formal education or training. You want to be an electrician, you go to journeyman school. You want to be a plumber, same thing. Painter, finisher, being considered, has long been considered an unskilled trade. And we know that's the farthest thing from the truth. So I've noticed as well, kind of to your point of going into these factories and these shops, these big cabinet shops, doing, like Bentwood, amazing cabinets, but there's no formal education for training on the painting side. It's go watch that guy.
No, the absence of an absence of an official vocational school where people could say, I'm going to send this person here and they're going to be trained to be a finisher, right? That doesn't exist. Pitt State is really close. Pitt State in Kansas is probably the closest.
In their woodworking realm, yeah, they do good.
Oh, yeah. No. And I love Pitt State. We have clients that are graduates of Pitt State. And so I would say people have actually asked us to start a vocational training school to send people to. And so not saying that that's on the horizon or anything, but what we have done is said, hey, look, give us a block of time. Pick somebody in your organization that is a winner, that is a cultural fit, that is a learner, that can apply things and then lead people with that knowledge that they gain. Then we will come in side by side and we will baptize them in the technical side of things. And we found that is a very beneficial, sticky situation. It's kind of like bringing that vocational setting to the on-site. And sometimes we've taken people off-site to labs just because, being able to focus on certain things that people were wanting to learn. Right now the hot topic is 2K PUR for high-end cabinetry and millwork. A lot of people are switching from CV to the 2K PUR. So sometimes the ability to do that while production is running and things are doing, so we go off site for that type of thing. But there is a huge demand for vocational training, just like you're talking about, to make it sustainable and repeatable.
Exactly. We used to always call that, I like the process. I used to call that a champion. You get an organization, you find your champion, and you just dump everything. You make them the god at that facility, and they can answer all. You get them in there and they're the attributes that you mentioned, you can make them to do. They can answer 90% of the questions, and that 10% they can't, then they're calling up, say, hey, Joseph, I got a question like this. Can I do this? And to me, that is one of the best ways in our industry, whether it's on the manufacturing side or the distribution side. You find that champion and you just give them unfettered access to your brain to get as much knowledge as they can. And it tends to pay out in the long run, I've noticed.
Well, I want to address something right there, right? Is that everybody, whenever they start a business, whether it's from humble beginnings or they go get a bank loan and purchase property or whatever else it is, eventually it's to scale it for whatever purposes that there are. It is to scale it, right? And so, beginning doing everything yourself and then moving that to a model or however it is that you start. Eventually, in this industry, self-proclaimed finishing experts can write themselves a big ticket if they're applying for a permanent job somewhere. And so people are hesitant, and this not just finishing, right? In the woodworking industry, people are hesitant to truly train people into that because, like, hey, they're going to go someplace else and make more money, right? And so, where they're doing is, hey, is then what's the cost of not training people? And I would say, if you pick somebody like I love that word champion. If you pick somebody like that, that is a cultural fit, that is the best chance of somebody staying with an organization and that training coming back full circle.
Yeah.
That is,
100%.
we found that works better than going and doing this development with, I'll use your word champion, right? Actually works better than going through a recruiter and hiring a finishing expert through a recruiter as a permanent employee.
If you think about it and you find the right fit with the right attributes that you mentioned earlier, you get into that realm of you're teaching someone and giving them knowledge that is going to take their career to the next level. And if they have the right attributes of being a leader and helping people learn and being open-minded, they just it's almost like a pay it forward. Like you, Mr. Business Owner, saw something in me to send me to go do this training, paid for all of this. Like, it's my duty to take in this information and pay it forward to you and teach it to these guys. So it creates I want to call it an owner mentality, but it creates someone that has, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for here, that has a sense of worth and a sense of, and I don't want to say indebtedness, but kind of like indebtedness to be like, this guy saw something in me, and they actually stay longer versus going somewhere else.
And I'm going to say is in the market. So there's a lot of things and again, if you just peel it back one layer, in the wood industry, our average age is somewhere over 48. That is 10 years older than general industry at 38. And so people are aging out of this industry. I mean, they retire, they move to other industries, they die. I know that's morbid, but we had a client and their average age, furniture manufacturer, their average age was 57.
Oh my goodness.
The average age in their finishing department was 61. And so while that's an extreme end of the bell curve, right, is that there are things that in this industry where standardizing knowledge, sharing knowledge, and creating a culture where standardizing and sharing knowledge is not only okay, but essentially that's how you win, is absolutely imperative. And I use that as an extreme example. There are many other examples. So if somebody trains somebody in your organization and that person moves up, okay, and this person that trained them suffers from doing that, right? They don't want to train anybody ever again. And so what we tell people is to turn around and then incentivize. If you want to incentivize behaviors, the best beliefs and habits and behaviors and not just the results, incentivize people to train. And all of a sudden it goes from, hey, I don't want to show anybody how to do things right because I might get fired, I won't get a raise, whatever else it is. All alternatives, okay. It completely turns it on its head where culturally, okay, I'm incentivized to train and share knowledge and to learn.
I did a stint in the corporate world when I was fresh out of college for a rental car company, and we won't say their name just so I don't want to get in trouble. But there was a guy there, and his name was Dave Olson, and he was another good mentor for me when it came to like what you're saying, and he stuff that I've took from him and pushed into my career was in a business, in a company where whether it's a Bentwood or a large furniture manufacturer, if you share knowledge and you get people working with you, not necessarily for you as a leader, you can get people working with you and not for you. The best way, and leadership has to see this too, and they have to acknowledge it, like you said, is the best way to get promoted is to have all your work done and look really bored. It's like if your supervisor comes in and was like, I haven't had one kitchen come back in like 6 months. I mean, Dave over here's, I mean, he's running the finishing department. No kitchen's coming back. He's walking around drinking coffee 6 hours a day, but everything's getting done and he's ahead of schedule. All right, Dave, what are you doing? We gotta give you some more work. We gotta promote you. And can you do what you did in finishing over here? You know, I mean, I've really took that to heart in my career, and it works. I mean, it doesn't mean you're not going to work, but you have to learn the subject matter, and you also have to learn how to lead people in a way that they don't know they're being led, if that makes sense.
Without a doubt. And I would say that in that realm and how it applies to finishing, right, is the ultimate, the true purpose of a leader is to make more leaders.
Correct, 100%.
The most important part is being able to gain results through others without necessarily the authority to do so. If you have the organizational authority to fire, hire, all the rest of that, that's cool, right? But if you can convince somebody to do something and to do something well, and you share knowledge with them to do that, then you are earning the moral authority to lead them. In the realm of finishing, there is so much arrogance and hubris and ego, and I'm not going to say it here because it's not professional, but a true leader is then able to say, let's learn together. Okay. Essentially, that's what we are telling with our clients is let's learn together. Right. And then say, hey, look, we're going to focus on the best results, and we're going to be intellectually honest in what we're trying to do. And in the area of leadership, like you talk about, is it requires humility. Finishing and finishing well, whatever wood products you're making, right, it requires humility. Or all of a sudden you look up and you are years behind technology. You're applying a coating outside of its bounds, or you're not using a coating that could save you money, make better products. And so just the commitment to learning and sharing knowledge is a key leadership trait in finishing.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to swing back to, you mentioned earlier, I don't want to forget this. Kind of want to pick your brain a little bit on the commercial world. We'll call it the big box guys, or they've forever, I've been saying, like, we've got to get these guys off these postcat CVs and these CVs and get them onto PUs, 2K solvent PUs. So what you're seeing is that transition finally starting to take place?
Well, at the high end, yes. And so you have two things. At the high end, your finish. I don't care, millwork, cabinets, etc. At the high end, your finish sells. At the end of the day, you can talk about your design and your box build. Okay, if you're making a $30,000 dining table or the cabinets to go around it, it's the finish. And so at the high end, people have figured out, oh, hey, I can apply this 2K PUR. I can put higher dry film on there in less steps, and I get a better product. And I can take it and I can show them the chemical and physical properties, all the rest of that compared to the CV. That has created niche opportunities and markets for the people on the high end. I would say that there is still a large amount. If you're putting on a paint, if you're putting on a CV paint, and you're doing 3 or 4 passes, this applies to a lot of people at not necessarily the high end, but I would say mid to high, maybe even mid, depending on where your price point is. But let's say you're putting on 3 coats of a conversion varnish, just for sake of argument, in a pigmented system. And you're using a primer, 40-something% solids, and you're using either another primer, 40-something% solids, and a top coat, 30-something% solids, or something in between there close, right? What we've seen, and again, it has yet to filter down, and there's probably some reasons for that, and there's probably some valid reasons, and I'll bring those up in a second. But we've had a lot of people that were doing 3 or 4 coats of CV and went to 2 coats of PU, and so they put on a primer that's 77% solids at 6 mils, and then they put on a pigmented top coat at, say, 5 mils of also 70% solids material. A lot of people don't know that the isocyanates actually has solids in it. So while you're adding the isocyanate catalyst, you're also adding solids. And I remember the first time we did this with the client and they applied the 2K PUR primer, heavy mil thickness, right? They pull it out and they looked at it and said, again, primer, right? They said, that flows out better than our top coat with the CV, right? So all of a sudden they're having to do less primer and scuff sanding, and it's flowing out flatter. And it just creates so much opportunities. But then when people look, okay, we go to a 2-step process instead of a 3 or 4-step process. That is a huge gain. And if you're making, say, a $500 box, right? Going from a 3 to 4-step process in your paint is a huge gain. I would say the distribution, the 2K urethanes, the distribution and service here in the U.S. is getting better all the time. If you live out in the middle of Timbuktu and you're getting your coatings from someplace and you don't have a place that has it in stock and it's not serviceable, it's really hard to make a switch like that. But I did every day, the distribution and the service here in the U.S. gets better. And so hopefully that trend continues. I think that the more that this filters in, the more people will see, okay, not only cost, not only capacity, I'm reducing the number of steps, quality. It makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah. I mean, even the smaller guys, when I started doing it years ago, I just kept trying to tell people, like, I get there's a need and a price point for pre-cat. I get it. I would always argue it was pre-cat and PU, 2K PU. Like CV, gone. Pre-cat, if you're in a price point game, if you're playing with the box stores and trying to go on the cheapest. But other than that, PU, higher solids, better chemical resistance, better elasticity.
Non-yellowing. that's people, the CV, there's so many white kitchens, right, that went out in the last 20 years that are like stucco now, right, that had CV on them.
Because now they're antique white. So it's been an interesting world in that way. And and I'm glad to see more guys are coming around to it, because I always was struggling with that. I'm like, if you just, and I know a lot of guys get, the pot life gets a lot of guys, because CV, they started pushing it. You know, it was 4 and then 8, 12. Now there's 24-hour pot life, but there's some guys out there now on the PU world that are doing 12. And I want to say, you know, one of the big guys.
No, there's acrylic PUs that have longer pot lives, right?
There's a 24-hour PU primer out there right now,
without a doubt. And so at the same time, like we have a client in Georgia right now, and they're putting in a 2K mixing system with their 2K PU, and they're like, hey, but pot life's no longer a problem. And I know that maybe that's dependent on what size you are. Sometimes that's not an option. But to me, for the performance, and some people, I mean, the redneck version is you mix some stuff up and you have an alarm, you hit that button and you have an audible alarm when your pot life starts getting to where you're doing. I would say what I like of that, if you can pay attention to that, what I like about the shorter pot lives is they actually reduce the amount of coating you wind up throwing away.
Yes.
Because you have to pay you have to pay attention to what you're using, right?
Yes.
And so we had another client in Indiana, and they put in a 2K mixing system for CV, and they're like, oh, well, our usage went up after we put the 2K mixing system. And I was like, how in the world did that happen, right? So long story short, they were hot potting a CV that had an 8-hour-ish, 12-hour-ish pot life. And they were using it, they would cover it, and they would use it for almost 5 days, almost a week.
Was just about to say that. When I went to the distribution side, these guys I found out they put CV primer in the freezer at night or in the fridge and then bring it back out the next day and use it. Slow down that catalyzation, because catalyst is completely different than an isocyanate hardener.
It is, but if you look at a lot of these TDSs and they look at the temperature and they tell you don't ever go below this, there's a reason. So, I mean, some of these things are funny. I mean, a 2KPUR coating does not like to be applied cold or hot. And, we had a client, they were trying to spray a 40-degree 2KPUR. And it didn't work very well. So, the pot life, if you're willing to work with it, for me, it's worth it. That said, if you want to do something, you're going to do it. If you don't want to do something, you're not going to do it. That may seem a little harsh, but if you look at all the benefits, to me, that's worth it.
Yeah. And then, you mentioned, you alluded to it earlier, there's a lot in the average age of our industry and the lack of interest in new technology that I think holds back a lot of these companies. When your average finishers mid 50s to 60s, they know what they know, and that's what they're going to want to use. So getting younger people into our industry introduced to these newer technologies and getting them out there, I think, is key for your PUs, your water PUs, your acrylic PUs to really just take off and take over the industry like they did in Europe for 30 years ago.
Like I said, everybody's scared because there's all these horror stories where people have made the switch and all of a sudden they can't get the product. We've had some clients that have personally experienced that. They make the switch. Hey, everything's coming, and they put samples in people's hands. The designers and their customers are all excited about it. They get rolling, and all of a sudden they run out of product, right? And so those horror stories scare people to the point they're like, okay, well, this looks great, but if you can't get it on a consistent basis. And we even counsel people, here's the companies that supply these chemicals and supply them. Well, set up a supply agreement, get visibility of on-hand inventory so you know what the lead time is, that that you got a solid supply chain, and they have somebody there that can service that product, because there is a switch, there is a technique. I'll tell you, I love using bucket heaters. I love acclimatizing the product before you use it. A lot of our clients have gone and made a small room where there's a heater and air conditioner in there, and they keep it at temperature. It's very dense, so it doesn't heat up really fast, and it doesn't cool down very fast either. So if you put it in there and pull it out at 77 degrees, it's going to be 77 degrees pretty much the entire time that you're using it.
Yeah. We've done that.
And I say these things just to be real, because I was in the shoes of having to make stuff go out the door for 27 years before doing the consulting and engineering gig. And so I encourage coatings suppliers to bring it up as an option and commit to the supply chain and to train their technicians on how to service it.
So this is, I'm interested to get your take on this, because I've always wondered, and being on the consulting side and engineering side, maybe you'll have some good feedback. So, we all know there's, Europe, there's more PU manufacturers, polyurethane, for those out there that aren't 100% familiar with the term PU, but solvent and acrylic, water-based polyurethane manufacturers in Europe. That's where 90% of them come from. And distribution is getting better here in the US, and there's a couple here in the US that are doing it. Centurion CIC makes a water polyurethane, not a solvent. But what I've never really grasped on, and I've kind of hit and can't ever get a good answer, is why, and I'm told it may be starting to happen, why your domestic manufacturers your SW, your Axo, your Exalta, why these guys are not even Gemini, why these guys aren't getting on the train and starting to R&D and manufacture these things here. Like, I've heard Axo is starting to just bring one in, but
yeah, no, they are. And so some people, it's just you don't know. So we got a great relationship with Axo, got a great relationship with Gemini, got a great relationship with Exalta, Sherwin-Williams. Sherwin bought ICA, or ICA for the American people. Yeah, so ECRO has got a big distribution footprint here in the U.S. now, and so part of it, if you're a chemical manufacturer and you set up and you are blending and manufacturing chemicals, it is easier to focus on certain chemistries to produce in certain volumes. And if you have a large volume that's still being used, it's a certain chemistry, it's real easy to focus on doing that and for it to be your cash cow. And your workforce is trained to do it, et cetera. And so in their defense, trying to turn an aircraft carrier around and looking at possible financial risk and doing that, it's a hard it's a hard turn to make.
I've talked to the guys, and I know the guys at Gemini very well, great friends, all of them over there. What's interesting is from being on the manufacturing side and dealing with these resin manufacturers, even here domestically, they produce more PU based resins than they do anything else, because it's still
that is true.
And I'm like, for your automotive, for your aircraft, even metals going to PU.
Yeah. No, the resin suppliers definitely. I mean, there is definitely more volumetric resin production here in the U.S. than in Europe for polyurethanes, because it's in foam, it's in glue, it's in all kinds of other things that are not coatings. And so I would say that is that the approach is, we use Gemini for example, right? They partnered with Circa, and we have clients that use their product, right? And so as that begins to switch over, when they look at, okay, they take for instance their facilities here in Dallas and El Reno, is changing those over to where basically they're going to run majority of PU. I still think that that's off in the future a while, and it's just part of it is that the industry is. If you look at the EIN numbers, right, there are a few people over 100 million, right? There's a few more over 50 million, a few more over 25, even more over 10. If you look at the people 10 million and less, there is a ton of them. And so it is essentially one of those paradigm changes that for it to work really has to be pushed from both ends.
I've long said that if you could get SW to stop manufacturing high build lacquer and CVs, that pretty much take care of the whole industry.
Well, sure. I mean, you can pick that as a starting point. The problem is, businesses are in business, and so when people look at it, how do you make a change like that and to make it also a great financial impact? There is a lot of infrastructure, organization. And so the modus operandi has basically been for domestic chemical manufacturers to partner with European chemical manufacturers and to bring that over. And I would say I see it both ways. I see it from their standpoint. Exalta, partnered up with Emron.
It didn't quite go as they planned.
Well, but I'm going to say from their strategy, I'll speak. They have some clients that all of a sudden, when they saw the Emron product, they switched from a CV. And so there's this organization, marketing, infrastructure at the facilities where they are blending and crafting these with solvents, resins, binders, all that good stuff. Would I like for it to be better? Absolutely. And so what I ask myself is, what can I do? What can I do? What can we do to make it better? Right? Education, right? And And I would say education goes both ways. Even to the chemical manufacturers, showing them, hey, look, if you want somebody to do this, approach it from this standpoint. The more trust that there is gained, the more people have trust for the supply chain and the serviceability for the change. It will continue. Do I think it's going to happen tomorrow? No.
I mean, I've told guys the same thing. Kind of one of the points of the show when I started it was to manufacturers and end users. I want them both as guests on the show. I want them all listening to it. I want Chris Hicks to listen to the show and be like, crap, a lot of painters are saying they need X and no one's out there doing it. Why don't we do it? It's for the same thing that manufacturers can painters can have a word in saying, hey, this is what we need in the industry. This magic sauce, this solvent, this product, this paint. And it can get to those manufacturers who are doing it, whether it be Gemini, Exalt, or anyone, and say, hey, I can make that. We do that for the industrial world. We can get it into the finishing world. And that open communication and education both ways. So they know that more and more people are going to PU. But what scares people from going to PU is the availability of stuff coming over from Europe. And they want to go to it, but there's not that many local domestic manufacturers of it. So the more that we get, I think the more switchover will happen. I think AXO doing it.
And I want to throw a wrench in this, right? Is the other part is you have the machine manufacturers, the spray machine manufacturers, and then you have the fluid delivery people. And we got great relationships with those people as well. And we've converted a lot of people to spraying a 2K PUR on a flat line. And getting those people on the same board when they look at the pot life, when they look at, preparing the chemicals, using the chemicals, best temp to use them, you're going to a finer level of precision. And so I will say some drawback from the user side is people have made the switch. They leave their flat line too long. They stop up all the lines and the guns because it blocks. It doesn't just go past its plot life. It blocks, right? They pay a $10,000 bill to fix everything, and they're kind of scratching their heads, oh, we can't do this anymore. Well, then the people down the street hear that story and like, oh, we're never doing that. My message is that, no, that's an unfortunate situation, right? And just like sometimes the supply chain gets interrupted, it's a horror story. I would say don't let that, if you have good organization and you don't mind learning something, don't let a story like that keep you from seriously considering it. And I'll point out, if you look at Sheffler Live, we always speak at Sheffler Live. We always do something. And this last time I looked up, and the majority of the audience, do you know who it was? It was chemical manufacturers. And pump and gun manufacturers, and I'm over here sharing it. And so it was a great time. There were some attendees there as well, so it wasn't a complete loss. But what they started asking, okay, well, what are the main things that people need to pay attention to if they're switching from a CV to a 2K PUR in a flat line? Well, then guess what? The next PowerPoint that came out was, here are the top things you got to pay attention to use this well. And so the spray machine people and the pump and gun people have a horse in this race as well. And, we've worked really close with Sames Kremlin in developing fluid delivery systems for 2K PURs in an American setting to be used correctly. And that has also been a learning. But guess what? The next client that does this, they get to benefit from all of that R&D and all of that learning, where somebody else started off and they scratch their heads, they stop everything up, whatever it was.
You've got to have the guinea pig.
And I would say that even the guinea pig people, I will tell you, Latham, Bell, the people that have done this, they would still tell you that it's worth it, right? They've experienced some of these horror stories, and they will tell you it is still worth it. So that would be my message. And if you're not getting answers from chemical suppliers, from these, go to the next level, right? Don't be afraid to say, hey, show me, this doesn't make sense. Now I'm going to jump back in the chemical suppliers thing, is that sometimes people, they really, really need to be faced with the truth. And what I'm saying that is that I know that they're selling something, and then that's their bread and butter, just like knowledge and experience is our bread and butter. My message to them is sometimes a presentation, a more holistic presentation, a better, clearer understanding of this is how it could work from A to B. And again, I'm not saying don't be inflammatory, any of those things, but to really say, look, if you have to have 6 mils more, 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, a dry film build, these are the chemicals that are going to do that, right? If these are here, these really don't work that way. And you may not have a failure or a problem today, but you might tomorrow, and you might the next day. And so if you look at film failure in the field with traditional acid cure products, under application and over application is 80% of the problem.
I would verge to say maybe higher than 80.
I'm trying to be fair, right? And I mean, the using it, 5 days past its pot life, just because it goes and sticks on there and goes out the door does not mean that that's how it stays. So if you've got a cabinet and you got a lifetime warranty or a limited lifetime warranty or some type of significant warranty that you're putting on there, you're not only looking at what it looks like going out the door, but what it looks like 5 years, 10 years, 11, 12, whatever it is. And I would say, go back to the performance. Selecting chemicals and using chemicals it's a difficult process, right? But you have to live in reality. You have to live in the truth. I go back to my original point is you have this world. So chemical manufacturers, the more they can bring that reality home and say, look, these chemicals work well here, these chemicals work well here, these chemicals work well here, it will help all the way around. And I'm not saying they don't do that now, but it's real easy to take a check from somebody because I've sold this to you, right? There's a difference between order takers and salesmen. And in that side, I believe education will drive people to make more and different coding choices going forward than they have traditionally.
I would agree with that. I think that's an excellent advice. Like, so I know we're getting into, coming up on an hour here. See, I mean, everyone always, it goes so fast. It just blows my mind how fast an hour goes by. Real quick, give us kind of on the entrepreneur side, what are some challenges that you faced talking to those guys out there looking to start their business, whether it be a contracting company or maybe they want to start making coatings? I don't know. What are some challenges that you faced when you started getting IWPS going that might help guys to be like, hey, if you're going to do this, here's what you need to look at. If you're going to sell outside the U.S. or work outside the U.S., here's some stuff to consider.
I mean, if you start doing work outside the U.S., make sure you understand their laws and how you're going to get paid and exactly how business is done, right? And some other countries, things are completely negotiable all the way to the end, right? But our business model is a little bit different. Ours is knowledge and experience. We're not producing a physical, tangible product per se. That's it, is we help people start businesses and grow businesses. And so from the entrepreneur side of people that are doing finishing, whether they're producing products, whether they're doing on-site finishing, et cetera, what we notice is that when they start off, usually it's one person doing the majority of the work, which is completely fine. I understand that. As businesses take off, you go from on-site finishing, and a lot of on-site finishers then want to develop a small shop that they can finish components in, right? And so there's this organic progression, into what scale it winds up turning into is we always encourage people, essentially two things. One is You have the chemical knowledge, the application knowledge, what you're doing. Always look at what you're doing and making sure that you are getting paid for what you're doing. And continue to push that up till you find the limit, right? Build work that sustains cash flow. Cash flow is number one, and this business is still a business, right? And so make sure that you are creating cash flow through the work that you're doing. And some people have an expensive hobby, they call it a business, but there's also an emotional side. You make something. I mean, I've got a walnut desk here that I made for myself, right? I'm very proud of it. I do not have a business making walnut desks for other people. And so that emotional line of I created something beautiful will do that and make money at it, right? If it's doing this, then you got to sit down and ask yourself, okay, what are we really doing here? So, it does have to be a business. That said, is continue to learn and don't get stuck in an area where you think that one thing is going to carry you forever. That is not true. You'll look up one day and your competition will have by far surpassed that. Right? Learn as much as you can. As you scale, think of scalability as a dial and not a switch. Too many businesses look, oh man, here's all this business I can take on. I'm going to grow 100% in a very short period of time. That is usually a small business killer. On paper, it looks great, but the scalability to do that doesn't exist. So they flipped a switch. The knowledge, the ability to produce, sell, whatever else it is, has to go along, and a dial is so much better than a switch, right?
I mean, you got to be able to adjust it. You might have to come back, turn it back a little bit if it's getting too much.
It's the best way. It's the best way to do it. I'll tell you, is there's so much opportunity for people that do finishing well. Is consider different geographical areas if that's for you, and then continue to do more and more higher end work. There's margin in high end work if you do it well.
I loved it. I mean,
pianos, guitars, whatever it is.
Yeah, we started doing, before I sold, their last 2 years of my business, 3 maybe, it was prominently, we were doing all cut and polish kitchens, cigar boxes, high-end speakers. And that was the one thing my father taught me. You can either do less work for more money or more money for less work. You get down to the very bottom.
It's not a surprise which side of that I would fall on from the entrepreneurial side, right? Is you're always looking at your margins and what you're doing. Don't let the emotional reward or disreward of what you're doing get in the way of making good margins. When I say, these are all easy things to talk about. There are no simple answers. There's no silver bullets. It is very much implementation, right? But the one thing is to learn and to continue to learn, to scale bit by bit. And, no one has ever suffered business-wise. Set the cash flow to say, we're given, we've got good cash flow. Somebody's wood finishing business or a wood products business that does finishing, no one has ever killed their business by producing good quality. Finishing well, no one has ever killed their business by doing that. And so while the cost is there, I understand that. But, the absence of quality is a business killer. And in finishing, even more so. So anyway, hopefully that's some type of wisdom.
I love it. That's good.
I don't have a finishing business. Maybe that's the best confession.
I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, I love just getting tidbits of advice because there's guys out there that are wanting to scale, that are wanting to get that shop. So, just hearing advice from all over the place. And when I would train sales guys or hire new painters, when I had my painting business, it was, you're going to follow this guy around for a week or a month. Then you're going to help this guy for a month. You're going to help each crew leader for a month. if I'm trying to turn you into a crew leader, you're going to shadow each crew leader for a month. If you like one of those ways, adopt it. Make your own out of the 4 different ways that they had, but you've got to have a starting point. So giving guys out there the option and the expertise of people that have been in the industry, that have seen, shared knowledge and seen companies fail and succeed. What does that look like? That's invaluable information, in my opinion. So one last final, I don't know if you've caught a couple episodes or not. I want the community to get to know Joseph, who he is outside of work. Give us a hobby that doesn't include painting. Kind of let us get inside or behind the scenes of Joseph.
I have a grandson that came along in early August, so I don't know if that counts for a hobby. But,
spoiling can be a hobby.
Getting to hang out with him is pretty high on the list. I would say our family is pretty much an outdoors person, so lots of hunting, fishing, hiking, do a little bit of gunsmithing on the side.
That's cool.
Without jumping into all that, but
that's a whole nother episode.
It is. It certainly is. I enjoy those activities. We take a lot of clients hunting and fishing. That's always fun. But I would always say just play just as hard as you work or harder.
Yep. I mean, I learned a long time ago and was told by someone, if you have the mindset of you work to vacation, life is a lot of fun.
Yes.
The whole purpose of work is to get to take a month or so off and go enjoy it a little bit. Well, Joseph, man, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know you've got stuff going on. Thank you for coming on, man. A lot of great information.
Absolutely, Zach.
I know guys are going to really enjoy this. Shoot out your socials on Instagram and LinkedIn so the community guys out there can follow you and see what you're up to down the road.
I appreciate the opportunity, Zach, and I'm really glad that you do these podcasts and know that they're helping a lot.
Oh, man, thank you very much. Get a lot of great requests. People are enjoying it, and we've got a lot more to come. So thanks for coming on. Everybody, thanks for listening. New episodes every Monday, and hope everybody has a good one, and we'll see you next week.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.